Welcome, Marita. Thank you for joining us today. Marita is the CFO of Bang.co, which is a currency conversion and hedging platform. Yeah, that wasn't bad. Welcome back, Kit and Jamie. You might end up sharing a couple of microphones if that's okay. Let's start with you if that's okay, Marita, and then we'll start kind of making this bit interactive and taking questions from the floor. So I'm going to give you a list of questions I've been told I must ask you. So I'm going to have to work through this list, otherwise I'll get into a lot of trouble with Sarah. So the first question that is really kind of almost a wrap up of everything else that we talked about so far today, and that's in your opinion, what do CFOs really want to see from marketing when it comes to proving ROI?
Yeah, first of all, happy to be here. Nice to meet you all. So Marita, CFO of Bound, have been in finance pretty much all of my life, but started out in banking rather than as a startup CFO, so long journey. And really interesting discussion actually previously on, conflicts between sales and marketing and them wanting to be friends. So now we're trying marketing and finance, which I think takes the whole thing to somewhat of a different level. So what do we really want to see? I mean, Mitch actually kind of nailed it, to be honest, because I think when we talked on the phone to prepare for that, the first thing I threw at him was bow-tie reporting, which I think is actually, it looks really nice, really sleek. If you can manage to pull that off, amazing. I haven't really seen that in practice working super crisp and super clearly many times yet. So I think there are a lot of issues in implementing that. But what makes me happy as a CFO is that, right? How do we generate sales? How much do we spend to generate those sales? What are the different functions that contribute to that, mainly from top of funnel marketing down to sales, down to customer success, and then hopefully not spending too much money in the process to actually generate positive EBITDA in some way, shape or form.
Do you, in your experience, think that sometimes marketers are a bit scared of the CFO? I mean, from my perspective, I lead the commercial function across our agencies, and I see that we talk to marketers and solutionize with them and come up with the answers to all their problems. And then it gets to the end and they go, right, now I've got to convince my CFO. What sort of mistakes do you see marketers making when they're trying to present a business case and ask for money?
So I think the main mistake I've seen is when you ask for money, be clear about the money. I mean, it's very, very, very simple. How much do you want? Why do you want it? How are you going to use it? How are you gonna increase sales at the minimum? So if you have that nailed in the first 5 minutes, no need to be afraid, I would say.
What makes you say no?
Okay, so what I really, really, really never ever want to hear in my life again, to be very clear, is spending targets. And Sarah knows what I refer to with that one. So no, it was not her at all. She actually fixed it. But if you tell me just how much you want to spend, I'm not going to give you the budget. That's a clear no. Like, I want to spend 5 million. Okay. And nothing comes back. That's a no.
You've got to properly demonstrate what you're going to get back for that.
Just demonstrate, in a way, start with sources and uses. How much do you need? What do you need it for? And then what's the result of all that?
So you've got that upfront hurdles trying to get you to say yes to the activity in the first place. Obviously, you'll be keeping a very careful eye on it week by week and month by month. At what point do you almost kind of wave the red flag and say, hey, this isn't working, or actually I've decided to cut this?
Yeah, so I think there are a few different points to mention here. One, if it's a very clear and well-trodden path and we know the conversion rates, we track them, it's working, it's always a bit of divergence here or there, but if it's within the divergence that's expected and volatilities around that, that's probably fine. If it's something new we're testing, and I was convinced before by my lovely marketing team that it makes sense to spend X amount on testing. The testing will be way more scrutinized, and it will be on a weekly basis. And ideally, you've told me before also what amount of time it's going to take to see any results. And if that doesn't hit, then we'll experiment with something else, I would say. So that should actually be a fairly quick feedback loop. And I think it's in the interest of both the marketing, finance, and also sales team that kind of sit in the middle to see the results of that happening and not us waste a whole lot of money, time, and resources in the process with something that just doesn't work.
I once had a marketer refer to their CFO as the FPO, the Fund Prevention Officer. I think that's quite an unfair label. I guess kind of are there times in your assessment of marketing activity when you actually pull in the marketers and go, this is really working, we should do more of this? And does that happen enough in your opinion?
So in terms of being the prevention officer, for all my sins, I have done sales in my life before. Right? So I have a lot of sympathy with marketing and sales teams to start with. That's not the case for absolutely every CFO. I get that. But yes, if something is really working, you need to double down on it. That's pretty clear. But sometimes what you also find is that the doubling down doesn't result in double the results, and then you just pare it back. So yes, I have had that.
Great, thank you. How do you think in a holistic fashion, how do you think marketing and finance teams can work together maybe more collaboratively and kind of get closer early on in the planning phase?
Well, I think the main bit is to actually collaborate. So have meetings in the diary regularly, because if you don't communicate, nobody knows what's going on. And I think that's the scariest bit on both sides. So if marketing doesn't know what the budget's going to be next time around, and finance doesn't know what actually is going on and what the conversion rates are and where the money is going and being spent and coming back in, that's just bad. So have proper communication, very straight, set it clear, and set expectations at the onset. So if you're expecting something to happen and it happens, that's good. I think usually makes everybody happy. If you're expecting something to happen, it doesn't happen, be open about it. Don't hide in a corner. Don't try to, obscure any results that you don't like. Just be open about it and then be constructive. And in most companies, it needs to be a collaborative approach. You cannot just compartmentalize and have your silos and think, okay, but I'm in marketing, so I don't care about, sales activity in the end, or our finances or EBITDA, or, what that means for the next fundraising round or investor communication or whatever it means. So, try to work together between departments. I think it's super, super critical, and it's becoming more critical as the world gets more complex. So everything has links and interlinks, and we just need to be aware of that and work on it.
And do you think marketers need to get better at speaking finances language in terms of using the terms that they understand, or using the kind of the language that will make them prick up their ears and go, yeah, actually, this is worth spending money on?
So in the end, of course, there is finance language, right? In the end, we try to be special. It's just, what every kind of profession tries to do. But I think the onus tends to be more on finance to learn the marketing language. So if I don't know what leads, MQLs and SQLs are, shame on me. So I do need to know what that means, and I need to know how to track that. So a bit of both, but I wouldn't expect any pure marketing person to know everything about finance. It's not their job. So they don't need to know it. But they do need to know that everything ends with numbers and potentially starts with numbers. So it's not all creative and not all nice. There needs to be tracking in place for you guys.
Do you think that the ultimate decision should stop with the CFO, or do you think marketers should feel empowered to go, well, the CFO said no, should I go elsewhere and try to persuade them? Or do you think you should be the ultimate kind of yes-no decision maker on marketing activity?
I don't think I've ever had a decision where it was just mine to make on marketing. So usually it's with the management committee, exco, however you want to call it. So you have the CEO involved, you have the finance function involved, and potentially others. Look, budgets are limited, resources are limited. Everything needs to be split in the right way. I don't think the decision should be only with finance, and hardly ever really is, because I need to also defend to the CEO why we're not growing, right? So that's
I see from the companies that I speak to that certainly the kind of younger generation of CFOs tend to be more entrepreneurial now and are more less risk averse and more kind of open to trying new things and experimentation. Is that something that you see as well?
No.
Right?
Absolutely not. I think the younger you go, the less experience, the less confidence. The first reaction actually is to say no. It's the normal reaction you have in a finance department. So I think the more experience you have, the more you have seen, hopefully the better the decision making, because you have seen most of the things before in some way, shape or form. And I think you'd be more likely to get a yes from a somewhat older person.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions from the floor for Marita? See. Oh, there we go.
Just one. That about what you got that top dividing it. No, no.
Thank you for the question. At least one person I haven't scared off yet. So thank you for that. So if you're talking about changing opinions, about brand perception, things like that, for me, it's very, very, very top of funnel. Because without that, nobody knows who you are. Nobody knows who the organization is you work for. You cannot measure that directly. But the bigger you are as an organization, the more you will have to do of that. What I would say is on those campaigns, be clear who your ICP is. So who are you really trying to reach? Who do you want to convert with your campaign? And also be very clear about the budget you want to spend on it, because those kind of campaigns tend to be extremely expensive. It's hard to change opinions for anybody on anything, right? So just what I would want to see as a finance person is have it contained to an agreed budget rather than it completely running out of control with no measurements in place, no nothing in place, just because there isn't anything that you can measure concretely. You should eventually be able to see more leads coming in on the very top of the funnel from those campaigns. If nothing happens, if you have, spent millions and millions and millions and millions and nothing ever changes in the rest of funnel, probably means it's not really working what you're doing.
Yeah. Could I pick on someone in the audience? Chris, I know you're kind of you're well experienced at trying to persuade people to spend money for some of your kind of more entrepreneurial ideas. You got any top tips for pitching to a CFO?
Get plenty of other stakeholders involved before you go to the CFO as well, so kind of test the idea. But I guess ultimately, it's a word we've not seen that much throughout this morning, but actually pipeline, right? So what is marketing's contribution to pipeline? That's the sort of thing that you want to see. We can't necessarily. We've seen the kind of lower down the funnel, that conversion point from marketing qualified sales accepted through to opportunity. We can't necessarily influence that. If the decision comes down to what's the increased revenue, that's kind of out of our control. But actually, let's focus in the areas that we can make a difference as marketers. And that's the thing we go to finance with. So I think.
Great, thank you. Mitch, would you like to double click on that, because you're familiar with building pipeline and you've worked for a whole range of startup scale-ups and venture-backed businesses. Do you want to comment on what Chris just said?
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. The argument when you get to that point tends to be, okay, well, how much influence have marketing have had on these individual opportunities in pipeline, and how much a sales saying, well, actually, no, that's one of our ones. And I think that is the trickiest point to try and understand and uncover, and without harping on too much about it, because I have done for the last hour. If you've got that robust operating model in place, it does help to demystify that conversation, and then you can track back of sales. Say, no, I generated that. I phoned them out of the blue, and it's like, okay, well, great. Well, the CRM is telling us that actually there were like 10 different marketing touch points up to that point. So obviously, yeah, you had something to do with it. You closed the business, but you can't deny the effort the marketing have put in there to make sure that that person has all of the information that they need to be equipped with to put you on their short list of providers to solve whatever it is that you're solving for.
think, obviously we as a business eat our own dog food. We implement a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here today. And, the revenue operations engine that you put in place for us, I think importantly, it doesn't just bridge marketing and sales, it also bridges directly into finance as well. So everybody across the business is speaking the same language, looking at the same things, measuring the same things, and in desire the same outcomes. So I think that's a really important tip. Okay, Kit, can we come back to you for a minute? Is that okay? Obviously, CRO is a bit of a dark art. Still don't genuinely understand what you do for a living, even though we pay your wages. But how do you go about convincing leaders, not just CFOs, but leaders as a whole, that CRO and experimentation at scale is something that they should buy into?
Yeah, I think the best way to go about that is starting relatively small. Start by understanding where your problems are on your site, where your problems are with your customers. Generate some ideas as to how you can remove those, and then test and learn. Get some actual immediate results, and then that's the thing that you can use then to get buy-in. It doesn't need to be a fully fledged program right from the off. As soon as you prove them that you can improve key conversion metrics by 10, 20%, buy-in's going to be very easy to achieve at that point. You just need to kind of get people to trust you enough to find out what the problem is and run around free tests. One of them will likely be a big winner for you. As soon as you've done that, you're in a great position.
Quite often when we're putting proposals together for clients for CRO, we've got really big numbers in there that say, spend £100 on this, we predict it will generate £800. And I look at these proposals thinking, well, why wouldn't anybody do that? That makes so much sense. But is there a degree of, Marita, particularly when you see numbers like that, is there a degree of skepticism around those numbers?
As long as the data is clean, there's no skepticism. But it takes some time to get really clean data that you can actually work off, I would say, because sometimes it's just a mess, right? You have all sorts of people signing up to all sorts of things, to all sorts of different channels because of all sorts of different campaigns. So if you do experiment, keep it clean, keep it measurable, observable, and don't mix it up with all sorts of other things, I would say. And then there is no reason to question that the results are what they are.
So, Kit, how do you go about removing that doubt and removing that skepticism?
Yeah, absolutely. So you need to kind of work hand in hand with data teams. You need to make sure that data trust is there from the offset. It's the foundation in trust in data. Otherwise, anything that you do is going to be problematic. And as soon as you've got that, then it's just making sure you're applying the right level of rigor to your testing. You're applying the right level of statistical levels to ensure that it's not chance. There's absolutely no way it's chance, the same way that we do drug trials. And then you're absolutely confident that the changes you're projecting, that you're modeling, that you're seeing are ones that the business can trust.
Okay, great. Changing tack slightly, I think most marketing people get into marketing because they love kind of great creative and new ideas and being really innovative. Very few of them probably go to university to study marketing for 3 years in the hope that they'll sit looking at spreadsheets all day. And there's a healthy amount of that, I get that. But how do you persuade marketers that, they can almost kind of be as creative in data as they can with effectively pretty pictures?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. Again, my background to begin with was art history. So I've kind of come from that space of pretty pictures. And then I was in design. I just got frustrated, ultimately, that a lot of things I thought would be great wouldn't affect the bottom line in the way that I thought they would. And that became frustrating for me. I realized I need to find a better way to qualify my decision-making process. How can I ensure that it's not just about my gut, but it's about what customers actually want? And so I found the framework of A/B testing of CRO, and that's been the way that I've used to ensure that every single decision, every creative decision I've got is one that's actually going to make customers' lives better. And in a weird way, it allows you to be even more creative. You can push the boundaries higher than you ever have before because you know that there's almost no fail state for that. You know that if you do push it too far, you're going to learn from that, you're going to take it back, and you can roll back to a state or a version that ultimately your customers will like, but you can have the opportunity to find what the new future looks like. You're not just a business that's copying other people's homework. You're not a business that's just stagnating.
What techniques can you apply to allow CFOs to more quickly measure whether something's working or not? Because saying to somebody, we're going to try this for 10 weeks, may immediately make Marita just break up and go, so you're going to waste 10 weeks with the budget trying something. How can you start to de-risk that?
Yeah, I think there's almost two different ways to look at this. One of them is really simple and one of them is much more technical, so bear with me for the second one. The first is, as I said, think big and bold with your ideas. You're probably not going to influence users and their behavior and the overall conversion rates of your site by small little tiny tweaks here and there that they're not going to notice. Completely redesign a page, completely redesign a journey, reposition how you offer a product. That's where you're going to learn the most valuable things. The second part is how you model the data. And there's something that we do called sequential analysis. It just allows you to check in day by day, interaction by interaction, to see how that's modeling. And at a point decide, yep, after a week that was going to always win, or no, after a week that was going to always lose. And ensure that you're being agile, you're failing fast, you're winning fast.
Great, thank you. I've got one last question for you before I do. Any questions for Kit from the floor or about CRO in general? I think we got one there.
How best do you quantify then purchasing of creative services and things like that then justify the end means where it's not quite clear how the input has gone from spending on videography or creative products to then develop a brand or to then secure further leads or generation down the pipeline?
So I think that's really the beauty of A/B testing and CROs. You can isolate every single change and understand the impact of every change. So we've been working with a charity recently. We want to know, is static background images or video content more effective at driving donations? I'm able to tell you exactly how much more effective that is and how much more money that's going to make. That's the joy of A/B testing. You can isolate every single change and understand, this is going to generate this for me. This will generate that. Or conversely, this would have hurt me by this much. Let's avoid doing this. Where can we look on our site or in our journey to kind of stop doing this problematic thing?
Great. Just want to add, there's an interesting dichotomy there, I think, isn't it? Because if you then look at the cost of the creative and whether the impact of that is lesser or greater than the increased cost in a creative, if video thing is the one that's converting better.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. And to just continue to jump off that, the nice thing you can do is you can test on a smaller sample size to begin with. So maybe you're own a kind of clothing brand and you want to understand, we want to market to a Gen Z audience and we want to do the Gen Z shake and then show them kind of coming back and looking at the clothing they're about to put on. Let's try this for a trial range of kind of, 100 products, the ones that are bigger sellers. See if there's value in delivering it for those. Once we've proven that there's value here and we can actually quantify exactly how much that value is, we now know if it's worth us investing more time and effort, expanding that change out to the full catalog.
Great, thank you. One final question for you, Kit. What do you think the key metrics are that CFOs should be using to measure website performance, website optimization?
Yeah, really, really interesting. Again, I think you're going to want to look at kind of almost 3 points here. Immediately, are users sticking around at all? Are your websites, completely messy? Are they bouncing? Are they exiting immediately after that initial journey? That's where I think you're going to want to focus to begin with. Then have you got some way of capturing kind of a warm kind of browsing awareness stage piece? How can you capture them there? How is your kind of conversion rate being optimized around that journey? And then your bottom of the funnel lead. Ultimately, there's going to be some form of sale or form. You still want to make sure you're maximizing and optimizing around that. But you can't just look at the bottom of the funnel one. You need to kind of make sure you're nurturing the whole journey.
You agree?
So, look, I think the websites are often the first point of interaction with any lead, et cetera, right? So it is important. I haven't worked in a single company where the creative team thought the website was perfect ever. Okay. So I think that's the starting point. Is your website good enough for what it's supposed to do now? Or do you really, really need to invest and recreate everything from scratch? Or to your point, is it incremental? Can we check if this works better or that. But as long as you can isolate it and have some sort of result in numbers, the finance department will be much more inclined to give you the budget for it. And I think it's a dream if you have the clean data saying, okay, the video worked better than just static background. Amazing, right? So let's go. And I think it's just the communication also on what that isolation looks like, how the experiment looks like, how much you really want to spend on the website. Is your business consumer facing? At which point you probably want a really, really nice website that interacts exactly with your Gen Z audience or whatever you're going for. Is it B2B? Does it need to look a little bit more serious potentially? Or are you the, whatever B2B pirate and it just needs to look crazy for those few businesses that you are actually going to target? So I think you can go in very, very long, very expensive experiments with that. I would just say try to keep it contained. You're never going to be happy with a website ever. Just, take that as a starting point and then take it from there and make it good enough.
Mitch tells me on a regular basis that data doesn't lie, and my pushback is sometimes it does a bit. But let's just assume Mitch is right.
Depends on the data.
Yeah, exactly. Do you find yourself in quite the privileged position that you can almost foresee marketing's problems before they see them themselves?
Sometimes. I'm not sure if it's privileged. It's just a position. But yes, just having gone through the process a number of times with different companies now, it's just, Also, the engineers, obviously, that work on the website and designers are always kind of disappointed to start with, I would say, with what they're doing, how they're doing it. And if you can just say, look, it looks way better than before. You get the feedback loop, you get instant gratification because a couple of customers are interacting more with you than before. That's great news. It doesn't need to be the, 1000x times of success.
Great, okay. Mitch, let's double click on some stuff for you if that's okay. Thankfully, we seem to have a lot of HubSpot users in the room and a healthy smattering of Salesforce users. Thankfully, nobody put their hand up when you asked about Pipedrive, so that was good. You're a huge advocate of marketing attribution. What do you think are the most important points people should be focusing on when it comes to attribution?
That's a really interesting question. It depends who you are. If you are in sales management, to be more specific, the thing that's going to be most important to you at a face value perspective is, well, what was the last thing that happened before we created a sales opportunity? So there's that last touch attribution there. But actually, what Jamie was saying earlier, and I'm sure he's got a lot more stuff to say on this than me because it's not, his brain is so much bigger than mine on this, is the full funnel and understanding, okay, well, how do we weight different types of marketing engagement to revenue? Are we talking about, okay, is it how they discovered us? Is it how they went through that, the nurture process to understand what their problem is? Do we want to talk more about the value that attributing downloads of resources to and those sorts of things? Because that's how people then start to formulate, well, who's going to be on their shortlist for solutionizing for them. Sorry, this is a real B2B style on this. Apologies to you guys who are in B2C. Like, Jamie can help you out with that. It's not my area. And then, crucially, well, like, what is it that made them decide that they were going to talk to us about getting that solution together? So to recap, sales, last touch, marketing is way, way, way more complicated than that.
Yeah, so to touch on that, if you're a HubSpot user, which I'm assuming most y'all are, you want to go look at the signals, right? You get a lead coming in. The first thing you want to know, what campaign did it come through? What keywords, drove the click? And then after that, obviously before you vet it, hand it over to your sales team, you want to see, it go through the nurture, what additional pages did this lead or this individual, visit? So now I know I'm able to build a case for this prospect, right? And then if they don't convert right away, all right, well, then they're going to go end up in our, nurture bucket, and then we're going to retarget them later down the line, and we're going to hit them with personalized messaging. So I think from the marketing perspective is really understanding every touch point before it gets handed over to sales. And then if you have your lead scoring model set up and, in place, then that process should be seamless. You're going to get some leads who may come in and may not convert for a month or two. And when they eventually do, you're going to have so much data to look back and, hopefully make the sales a process, the handover process, much easier, because now you're arming your sales team with all the knowledge that you've gathered. They have a high lead score. Their intent to close will be a lot higher. And this also goes back to the full funnel approach, because they may not have converted off a retargeting ad from Google, but we may have, retargeted them on LinkedIn with the demo request or a personalized offer. For example, let's touch upon e-commerce, cart abandoners. I think that's, one strategy that most e-commerce companies like to go after is people that have added something to their cart and then just, bounced off the website. At that point, you put ads in front of them for any particular product that they looked at and anything similar to get them to buy, right? So I look at it the same way from a B2B perspective, because they may not be thinking about buying our other additional services, but if I know now that they've visited those services outside of our initial product offering, and I'm going to retarget them with, personalized messaging for all three things, because they're more likely going to bite out of one of those three things because they visited our pages, 1, 2, they've shown interest, and 3, after some time ingesting our stuff through nurture flows, they're going to bite, and we'll hand it off to the sales team and they'll give us feedback. And if it's a closed-won deal or an opportunity, at least we know now, hey, this is what a true customer journey looks like, because we have it all mapped out in HubSpot and we've seen every touch point they've made and what ad they've converted on. So,
one thing to add on that: if you're on a HubSpot Pro Marketing Hub subscription, you get 2 kinds of attribution. You get first touch and last touch. If you're on enterprise, you get a bunch of other weird and wonderful things. So unless you're on enterprise, just worry about what was the first thing they looked at and what was the last thing they looked at, because that's all HubSpot's going to give you.
Great, thank you. So we're coming to the end of, we've got about 10 minutes left. A couple of kind of really big questions for kind of all of you, I suppose. One is kind of, what trends do you see emerging that will really shape the future of marketing measurement and attribution? And then also, leading on from that, how do you see, and we can't get away from this in any sort of marketing event, how do you see AI changing the world? So feel free to just kind of spitball between you.
I think this idea of holistic revenue operations has been a growing trend over a number of years, with the dream being that all of the different teams that are involved in go-to-market are galvanized around a shared revenue target, rather than the previous world of work that we understand, whereas marketing sits over here, everyone else refers to them as coloring in, for better or worse. Sales sit over here, and never should the two meet, and finance is running around trying to figure out what's going on and whether or not the company's going bankrupt tomorrow. This more holistic way of doing things has become easier with the advent of new technologies. And I think part of that as well is that historically you had IT people running your revenue stacks. IT people don't necessarily understand marketing, sales, and finance use cases. So they set up the systems as they see fit. That leads to problems and all sorts of other things that you guys can imagine. Now, increasingly, you have people like me managing the stacks. They are marketers, they are sellers, they're just people that have more of an appreciation for data, and they understand the use cases that the technology is there for. What that means is that actually the revenue stacks that you guys are using are configured specifically for people like you, not just in the way that IT can maintain in the easiest way.
Great. Thank you. Kid, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm obviously going to focus in on the website a little bit again, so apologies for that. I think for me, it's just this idea of iteration in digital design, rather than just revolution and completely changing it at a point. I think everyone in the room will agree that your website just can't remain static for the next 5 years, 10 years. You're going to need to change it. So the decision for you then is, how do we go about changing that? Do we get bored of it? Do we hate it? Do we kind of bring in a different agency who promises us everything, down 5 years, rebuild it, relaunch it, cry because the SEO isn't where it was, cry because the conversion rate isn't where it was, and then kind of rebuild from there? Or do like a lot of the top kind of, companies, the digital kind of nurtured companies, the likes of Airbnb and Spotify, do we embed evolution in our DNA, digital evolution in our DNA? Do we ensure that every single time we're constantly evolving and changing our website? So from our customer's perspective, it's almost invisible. They didn't see kind of one morning a change from this to that. There's just been this beautiful kind of shaping over time. I'll bring out and share with anyone who's interested the evolution of Airbnb, but you wouldn't believe how much it's changed in the last 10 years, but no one's ever noticed one big kind of jump one day to the next. That's where I see a lot of value.
Great. Any closing thoughts from you, Marita?
Yeah, just quickly coming back to your how everything is going to change. I think we already saw quite a big change because the tools we have for marketing, tracking, tracing, like HubSpot, like Salesforce in the early days, have already gotten so much better and easier to use. So you don't need to be a tech whiz or coding or anything like that. Like anyone with a somewhat decent IQ can actually use them. And I think that has made things like massively easier for all of us. And I think the tools are going to change and improve even from here quite a bit, and particularly with AI, so that we can use hopefully HubSpot, etc., CRMs way more easily, get the data that we want, have everybody in the organization be able to see the data. And data is the new gold. So unfortunately, we all have to, take good care of our data that we have and use it to the max. And with that, I think also for finance, we see the same, right? The tools we're using in finance now are way different to the ones that we've used 10 years ago, other than spreadsheets, which are still spreadsheets. But, the tools around it are just way more user-friendly, and you can actually spend your time with more value-added tasks every single day, rather than just trying to find out the data and where it is and how to crunch it.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good.
One closing thought from Jay.
Yeah, so I think for us in advertising space, it's moving so fast. You're seeing, the rise of AI in your ad campaigns. You see it, with copy, creative. It's moving so fast that Google's now, they have an offering where they can create ads automatically with AI based off your existing campaigns. Same thing with your messaging. I think one point I want to make is don't stop, developing messaging on your own, and don't just rely on AI to do it, because AI can be wrong, and I've encountered it myself. It's good to test it out. I'm not saying not to do it, but never stop, really having those meetings with internally and looking at historical data before AI was a thing, because it was written by real people that, brought those ideas to life, and those ideas converted and produced business for you. But you can use it as an ally. I have automations that I've built with AI that have simplified my life, and scripts you can use on Google Ads. Same thing with LinkedIn. If you're running LinkedIn ads, you want to be really careful, because the AI generated stuff and you're running campaigns can really just blow up your budget. And then you're like, wow, I spent how much on this campaign? I think one thing that I've come to realize and noticed, and with LinkedIn ads, is they favor more of their AI driven campaign setups. So they have their new Accelerate campaign builder now. That's, one of their new things. So just be mindful of using it, and, be careful with your intent to use it. If you're trying to make your life easier by just setting something up really quickly, set up a paid search account. At least you can do responsive search ads. Those we all know perform really well. But just be very careful. Don't just rely on AI as an advertiser. Just kind of think of it as you can use it as a tool. I think in the future it might become more useful in some ways to help us identify trends, in a more better fashion than currently. But yeah, just, don't stop ideating, creating new ideas and new messaging, for your businesses or your clients, because at the end of the day, we want to still have that human element, to advertising, because that's what advertising is. It's emotion, it's playing on emotion, creating stories and storytelling. And that's something that I think that we should never let go. But yeah.
Great. Thank you. Any final questions to the room? We've got like 3 minutes left. Any burning questions that you want to ask in the open forum? Obviously, you can chat to any of the team afterwards, one-on-one. Hi. Can we grab a microphone, Gabby? Yeah.
Sorry. So when we look at marketing and AI specifically, we know a lot of use cases where brands use AI for cost reduction or say generating more ideas. That's the more widely used case. But because we're discussing marketing in the context of finance, I wanted to specifically ask, in your personal capacities, have you ever encountered a use case of a tool or some AI technology that has helped you with cost reduction, but also helping, say, generate more profits, reach more customers that probably would not be possible if only humans were doing it, or if you didn't have that tool?
That's a really good question. Yeah, so I'll give my thoughts here. The cost reduction is always a thing for advertising. It's like, how can I spend less and get more leads, or how can I spend more, or spend less and get more opportunities with what I have. And a lot of times you have companies that come to us who might have a smaller budget and they want to make it work. So of course the cost reduction, from a marketing standpoint, I always want to be careful of where I'm spending and how much I'm spending, and just being super glued and super hawk-eyes into all your campaigns, just to make sure that every dollar is accounted for your advertising spend, and you can report on it, and that's measurable. And then if you see campaigns that aren't performing well right away, then start shifting budgets away, or just kind of start allocating to campaigns that are performing better. So from a cost reduction standpoint, I guess that's just from where I come from. I think of that.
So when I think of cost reduction, I think the most valuable resource we have to us is not money, it's time. So if we look at cost reduction, we need to look at time spent doing things reduction as well, because ultimately that's what I'm paid on, right? It's the amount of hours I spend doing certain things. Technology that has helped me to do more with less time is, modern CRM systems. Having HubSpot spun up right. I came from a background whereby I would program like 35 different email campaigns a week to go out to a bunch of different people. It took a week. It's mental. With the advent of marketing automations and things like that, I can design one journey using the techniques that Kit has talked about, A/B testing, optimize, and then rather than it taking me all week to program a bunch of campaigns, I've done it once, I've turned it on, I've then got 30 hours a week left to actually do my job. So I would look at the cost of time rather than the cost of money first.
So I think I can jump in on the actual way that AI can charge up revenue as well. So obviously I've been saying that personalization has been a big cornerstone of optimization in the last 5 years, and AI has really supercharged this. So your website is like your shop, is like your biggest salesperson, and it's not going to work if it's one size fits all. It needs to recognize the types of content, the types of intent a user is coming to the site with, and start to customize the messaging so that it's appropriate for them. But in the past, it's been almost impossible modeling out those audiences to understand what type of user is this user, what level of intent are they at. But now with AI, we're able to kind of quickly and easily model out all of those audiences, then design strategies, design versions of each web page that's going to best suit them, test that, ensure that it's right, validate it, and then optimize. So we've got a complete personalized strategy for every single user that hits the site.
Just to follow up on that, don't forget to track what you're doing, because there is also the case where AI can actually increase your cost in terms of time and money quite a bit. So I've seen that people have tried to automate marketing and all sorts of things, and it works to a certain degree really, really, really well and is really effective. But there is a point where it stops being effective, where you have your AI writing your messaging, writing all sorts of things, and not just as a CFO, but also as a buyer. I get highly annoyed by those emails, because you can't tell what is AI generated mostly. And that's just a waste of money and time if you get those emails out, and people have a very negative reaction to your brand ultimately if you get those kind of messaging. So be aware of the flipping point, I would say.
And saving money also isn't often just a one-step process. It can sometimes be, if you're spending, say, £20,000 a month on ads, turn off the underperforming ads, the stuff that's getting you nothing, invest that in experimentation instead, and then make the rest of your ad budget do more. And that can either mean you can turn some of it off again, or it means you just get more leads, more revenue, more conversions from the money that you're already spending. So you've actually spent no more money. You're just making the money that you are spending work much, much harder for you.